Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, good. How do you talk about 44 and a half years of new life in the kingdom in 10 minutes or less? So it'll be snapshots and not the movie, I guarantee you. He grew up in a very liberal United Church of Christ church. This is starting off well. And summer before we never heard the gospel, but we thought we heard the gospel. Summer before my senior year in high school, my father just couldn't take it anymore. So he told the family we wouldn't be going back there anymore. But the next Sunday was rolling around, and he was used to going to church, even though he probably couldn't articulate why. And he was talking to the neighbor 3 doors down, who in God's good providence was the minister of music at a Grace Brethren church. And he said, well, why don't you come to church with us on Sunday and come over to the house for lunch and we'll talk. Well, we heard the gospel for the first time that Sunday, and within 6 months, all 5 of us had become Christians. In God's good providence, the minister and his wife were empty nesters for the first time that summer. Both their sons were in college and off earning money in Texas, and they really poured themselves into me for those 3 months. And near the end of the summer, the minister told me he thought I was called to be a minister of the gospel, and would I consider going to the denominational college rather than to the pre-law program I was in at Kent State University. And sure. 4 years of college, growing in grace, working for the church in the summers, 2-year internship after college in a Orthodox Presbyterian church plant under a very experienced minister. Seminary, my senior year in seminary, seminary really increased my sense of calling to the ministry. But the professors, the longer I was there, said, we really think you have teaching gifts too, and would you consider getting a PhD before you made the decision? So I did. Last year in grad school, my wife became pregnant, had to get a job. Westminster offered me a job, but we couldn't live on it. So I took a job at Westmont College in California, taught at Calvin College after that. Loved teaching, but still felt the tug to the ministry. After Calvin, I went into, I worked in the business world for a year, did a year's internship in the PCA, because you know that 2-year internship at the OPC was several years earlier, and they asked me if I'd come on staff. So I worked for the church for 6 years after that internship, and then Kirsten started headhunting. Taught at the college for 5 years, loved it, felt the tug to the ministry at the same time. 10 years ago, asked to start teaching at the seminary, and I found for the first time in my life that I wasn't being pulled in 2 directions at the same time. My passion for teaching, my passion for being in the ministry, I was in balance and equilibrium for the first time in my life, which is amazing. I've been a ruling elder in the PCA for 23 years. If the church wishes me to serve here as well, it's always a privilege to serve. What's the point of my story? I would just mention a couple things briefly. It's possible to think you've heard the gospel when you really haven't heard the gospel. it's possible to think you've responded to the gospel when you haven't responded to the gospel because what you've been hearing wasn't the gospel. It's possible to hear the gospel, not respond to the gospel too. Why have the last 44 and a half years looked the way they have? It's looked the way they have because there were people who shared the gospel with me. There were people who cared about me. There were people who discipled me at a crucial time in my life. There were people who were patient with me as my gifts developed. And boy, were they patient with me as my gifts developed. And those years in the church were a crucial investment in my being mentored by a man who'd been in the gospel ministry 25 years already when I started serving with him and under him. So it's God's story. It's not my story. If you are here, you are hearing the gospel. It is possible to hear the gospel and not respond, and we need to be careful of that. This is a church that loves you enough to share with you the gospel, who loves you enough to care about you, who loves you enough to disciple you and mentor you and invest in you and be patient with you as your gifts and graces grow too. It would be a privilege and an honor to serve this church in this way. Let's shift to the confession of sin and assurance of pardon. Again, we have an amazing call in confession of sin. Notice the three movements here. The terrible warning given by God to those who are not in his kingdom when he returns. The amazing offer of grace and new life. And what struck me this morning was the profound hope that is offered. And I'd like to just talk about that for a moment. It is so significant in Malachi that God will send Elijah, the prophet. No other prophets coming would offer the same hope. God sends Elijah, the prophet, at the darkest moment in the northern kingdom's history, when they had abandoned the God of the fathers and had adopted Baal, the Canaanite god, as the official god of Israel. The darkest moment in Israel's history, and God sends the prophet Elijah, who has an amazing and effective ministry to God's people. For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and all evildoers will be stoned. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in its wings. You will go out leaping like calves from the stall, and you shall tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day when I act, says the Lord of hosts. Remember the law of my servant Moses, the statutes and rules that I commanded him at Horeb for all Israel. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. Let's have a brief time.